All right, let's sew the sleeveless version of our Serenity sweater. So the assembly instructions are going to be pretty much the same up to the point where you get to the sleeve. Instead of sewing the sleeve on and then sewing your side seam, if you're sewing the sleeveless version, you're going to sew your shoulder seam and then sew the side seam in place. So just like I did there. Now we're going to attach the band. Attaching the band is just like sewing a neckband onto a t-shirt. So you have your band piece. I like to press mine before I sew it together. So I just go ahead and fold it wrong sides together along the long edge and then go ahead and press. And then open it up. Match those short ends and then sew those together and then turn the band right side out. So you'll have a band that looks like this. And then you want to find the quarter points of your band. I like to start at my seam allowance and put my first clip or pin there. Fold the band in half, and then this bottom one is our next one. Then take those two, match them up, and then clip or pin or mark in some way our ends. And then you have the 4 quarter points of your band. Now we need to find the quarter points of this armhole right here. So again, start with this side seam and mark it. Now our shoulder seam is not our halfway point. You can see that there's a different shape for the front and back of the armhole here. So what you want to do is gently, so that you don't stretch this out. If you have a really loose weave fabric, go ahead and stay stitch this before messing with it so that it doesn't stretch out. But just line up those raw edges and walk to the end where it folds. The size large is about 1 inch to the back of the shoulder seam, and that's our center point right there. Now, just like before, take our 2 clips, match them up, and then walk to the ends and pin. Again, be very careful so that you don't stretch this out. We don't want to distort those armholes at all. So we want to maintain the original shape of the arm side. Alright, I'm just going to pin it. So there, we have the quarter points marked of that. Now we're going to take our band and our armhole, our arm side, and we're going to match up quarter points. I like to match the seam of the band with the side seam of the sweater, right like that. And I am working with my sweater inside out, and then I'm pinning the band so that the band is against the right side of the sweater. So now take the halfway point and match it up near the shoulder. Remember, it's not the shoulder seam that gets matched to. And then our other 2 points. So we have the raw edges of the arm's eye, our armhole, lined up with the raw edges of our band. Just like that. So our band, you can see our band is a little bit shorter than the armhole. That's what we want. As we sew the band in place, we're going to stretch it gently. And be careful not to stretch the armhole, only stretch the band. So I'm going to pull my machine over here. And I'm just using my regular sewing machine for this. You can use a serger. If you don't have a serger, your regular machine is fine. I'm actually going to sew this with a straight stitch as well. It's not a seam that really needs to stretch. you'll have to be gentle putting it on, but the seam, it's not like it's a neckband where we're stretching the seam over our head, stretching that band to go over our head. So we can do a straight stitch for this. And then again, just gently pull the neckband so that it matches the length of the armhole, and work in those quarter segments, sewing it on with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So take your time, make sure your edges stay lined up. Some sweater knits like to curl, and so you really need to take your time and make sure that they're in place properly. Make sure that your shoulder seam is going the same direction as it is along the neckline. It should be pointing towards the back. And just work your way around. Again, you can do this with the serger. I actually like to sew my lighter weight knits, or my lighter weight sweater knits, with my sewing machine. I find that it's actually a less bulky seam than what the serger will sometimes produce. So that's just my preference. Really depending on, it just depends on the sweater knit. And if you look at some store-bought sweaters, you'll see that they're just assembled with a straight stitch as well, and not with a serger. So, all right, so that is our band sewn in place. Now I'm just going to turn this right sides out. And all that's left is to give this seam a good press. You're going to be pressing that seam towards the body of the sweater. And then just repeat on the other side. You can top stitch your seam allowance in place if you like. It's all personal preference. But there you have it. That's how to sew the band onto the sleeveless version of your Serenity sweater.